Hi, I'm Jude Perl, and welcome to Season 2 of Tough Crowd. Tough Crowd is an avenue for people to have open conversations around sensitive or difficult topics regarding population, such as choice around children or families. We hope you enjoy the interviews. In this episode, I interview the Baronesses. Now, the Baronesses are a group of women who've been meeting in Melbourne for the past 10 years, discussing and celebrating the choice to not have children. So I'm sitting here with the three of the Melbourne Baronesses, and I'm wondering, what is a baroness? What does this title mean?
It's a title of celebration, and it grew out of something that was said in Parliament to Julia Gillard. So Senator Bill Heffernan accused her of being deliberately barren and said, what would she know about running a country? This evolved in a conversation with a few women. Said, well, that makes us baronesses if we're women who choose not to have children. And from there, the whole title grew.
Reclaimed the name.
We have.
That's awesome.
It just suddenly became this celebration instead of like the poor barren ladies. It became like, no, you know, the baroness, like the world is our oyster.
I love that so much. And how did the three of you meet?
Well, we met each other through uni, actually.
Yeah, and through a population studies
population course. You two
used to live together.
Yeah. And we thought, we should invite more women to be part of this conversation. And so we put the word out. Suddenly there was a big bunch of women at the pub celebrating not having children or feeling able to talk about it.
That first meeting actually was a wonderful moment because there was just women from different areas, different backgrounds, different ages, you know, coming together. That moment felt really united and felt we could genuinely be ourselves and celebrate our decision in a really authentic way, you know.
And when is the next meeting, and when can I come? If that's okay.
It's so organic.
It's very organic, but you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
We'd love to have you.
We'd love to have you.
Yeah. Is there like a set number of you in the group, or is it just sort of people come and go? And
because we've done a number of activities. We did a day-long writing retreat. We went away for the weekend to do a whole lot of brainstorming about our ideas. Every time we just get more and more excited.
If you could just tell me, in a nutshell, what do you feel like is the main philosophy of what you do?
One, it's about having the conversation and actually holding our ground when people ask, do you have children? That you can say no. And look, it's different for different people. For us, it's about inviting other women to talk about it as well. And sometimes those stories are quite painful for them, but listening to them and also being there to say, it doesn't have to be like it's not.
Life doesn't have to be over.
Yeah, and that it can be a really rich choice. And especially, I think, when we're talking with younger women who are in that position of saying, look, I'm not sure, etc., that we can say, well, whatever your choice, just happy to say for someone that doesn't have kids, really no regrets, and I've been really happy with my choice. It's not the lonely existence that people may kid you about, and it doesn't have to be a sad story at all. It can be very, very rich.
Definitely for us three, genuinely, it's about celebrating our choice. There is an option. It doesn't have to be this path of get married, have children.
I love that, the celebrating that choice. It's and I was saying before, like the first time I met Tanya, that I had never, you had said that, celebrating the choice to be child-free, and I had never heard those words in the same sentence, and it was, even though I've known that that's been a choice that I've had for as long as I can remember, just hearing that was quite a really nice moment for me, just to go, oh, you can actually just be, like, you can actually celebrate this choice. It doesn't have to be something you have to hide from people.
Yes.
And I'm really interested to know, individually, how did you all come to this choice? I would love to know, was it a sort of a light bulb moment where you're like, oh yes, I'm not going to have kids, or was it something that you thought about over time?
Well, for me, it was a light bulb moment, and it happened when I was 15. I think that weekend I'd been with a friend and we'd done some babysitting, and I remember thinking, God, what a life, like this is incredible. I was standing in the kitchen and I had this epiphany, and I just said to my mother, I don't ever want to have children. And quick as a whip, she just said, oh, you don't have to, you can be a terrific auntie. And so I went, oh, okay. So in a sense, that was my licence, that decision made, that would be the journey. I was also really influenced by the Gillian Armstrong film, My Brilliant Career. I don't want the good guy to come and rescue me. I don't want the life of domesticity. I want a life of adventure.
How about you, Nadine? How did you...
So mine was probably a more gentle journey. I didn't have this light bulb moment, but my husband and I started a volleyball club and we just had kids in our world. We rescued kids that were having trouble at home, had kids that were high elite volleyballers that came to live with at our place for a year or two. So we just never felt the need to have our own. I genuinely believe it takes a village to raise a child, and we were part of the glue of that village, and it's just never been something that we needed to do ourselves. I think as I progressed and got involved in environmental background in my work, I felt that the planet didn't need more babies anyway, but there certainly wasn't this huge desire, except for one moment. I will tell the story when my godchild was born, my first godchild, and I went to visit her, and I really had this massive urge to grab her and run, steal this baby, but the urge passed very quickly, and I can't say I ever looked back.
Sure. Did you ever tell somebody that story and then they were like, oh, you should have kids? Like they sort of latch on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where people feel familiar, whether it's familiar ground, particularly mums, and they hear you tell a story like that, oh, you'd be such a good mum.
You're like, really? But the story is that you had an urge to steal a baby. I mean, I actually think that maybe that isn't a good idea. How about you, Tanya? What was your
it was sort of an evolving, growing story that I kept thinking, oh, well, one day this urge will arrive.
Yes.
And it didn't. And I sort of came to a point in time where I thought, really, now I have to make a decision. And I was just really way too scared to give up my freedom, among many other things, the things that scared me about the whole ordeal. Sure. It's out of compassion that I really feel I don't want to have a child into the way the world is at the moment, but I also see it as my carbon offset. And apparently that is the biggest carbon offset you can see.
I've also heard this, yes. Growing up, did you know other women adult women in your life that didn't have kids? Did it seem like the idea of not having kids was a really bizarre thing to do?
It was interesting, and when we first met, we were kind of talking about the old spinster aunt. But I would say that my mother actually had a spinster aunt who she loved, who spoiled her and her little sisters terribly. So I think my mum had clocked it pretty rapidly, like, oh yeah, you could be an auntie, you know.
I did have a friend who was older than me who had children, and she would say to me, I really admire, the fact that you're thinking about this, and, if I had a different life, I perhaps wouldn't have chosen to have children.
Yeah, right.
And so that was a really useful sounding board for me, just for her to basically give me that permission, because I certainly didn't get it from my mother. My mother actually was concerned and offered to pay for IVF treatment at one stage.
How generous of her.
She's accepted it now.
Yeah, sure. I think so often the story that's kind of sold to people is that when you have a kid, everything just sort of works out and it's just beautiful.
Yeah,
and
it's a lazy life.
Yeah, it's so much more complicated than that, and it's so important, especially when you're young, like for young women to sort of hear as much information, realistic information about it, so that they can kind of make an actual decision that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
For them.
We had a woman come up after one of the events that had 2 teenage children that really felt the need to speak about the fact that it had been such a hard journey for her, and she was saying, I would have done so many things differently, I would have travelled, and
it's equally taboo for someone to say that they've had kids and then go, I don't know if this was the right decision for me.
Not nice if your kids see it.
You don't really want to
be an interview or something.
Videos of me on the internet.
There's almost like a repetition in the conversation. People do talk about it, because when you say you don't have kids, a bit that I hear often from women is they say, don't get me wrong, I love my children.
Yes.
But, and then the but comes in, it's hard, oh my God, I miss my life, had I had the chance to do it again. I'm hearing those women, like, it is hard. If you are in a position, you know, that you don't want to, and that you can follow through on that choice, then, you know, by all means, do so, because either way, you know, and it sounds like it's a lot harder to have kids potentially.
I remember a friend of mine who I work with he's got one kid. He said something along the lines of, you know, people have kids because they're worried if they don't, they're going to miss out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like, if you have kids, you miss out on what it's like to not have kids. So it's like you just have to choose.
Yeah, you do have
you
to
can't
make a
have
choice.
everything.
You can't have both,
So
And we're getting this change, so, you know, the numbers are shifting. We don't quite know, you know, what it's all going to look like, of course. The UK research is it's about 1 in 5 women don't have kids. But the suggestion from a UK experience is that of those women who then are hitting 45 and don't have children, only 10% it was by choice. So that suggests for 10% it was about other circumstances, like medical circumstances, and then for the other 80% it wasn't their choice. So
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, because we'd like to encourage women who maybe haven't by choice, maybe even at this point, you can come to celebrate the freedom you have had.
Sure,
Obviously there's a grieving process, but maybe there's a time where you can look around and go, wow, I've been able to do certain things.
have you had to make difficult decisions with relationships, or have you had difficult conversations with people you're close to, family members or partners, because of this decision?
well, the partner thing does become a decision.
Yeah.
So I've had a long-term partner and now married, but at a certain point we had to have the conversation. Now, that wasn't a conversation in my 30s, but by the time I'm sort of in my 40s, it's like, oh, like, right now, I do actually need to check in with him. And so for us then, the conversation, it pretty much finished with, like, I was adamant about my position, but I knew there were two of us in this relationship. And look, he has no regrets, but, you know, at a certain point when there was a sense of, oh, you know, it is the done thing and maybe I would like to, and I said to him, well, are you prepared to stop working and, you know, and do that? And at that point, he really was like, no, like that, in a sense, that sense of identity for him was also really important.
So my partner's very happy with the decision and also celebrates the freedom. We frequently turn around to each other and go, wow, we're so free.
I was actually talking to my partner about last night, and he was saying absolutely no regrets, and that it actually gave us an opportunity to grow together throughout our relationship. We had much more space to do that than if we were having to tend to, you know, the caring of children as well. So
For sure.
from a relationship perspective, it's been, you know, really rewarding being able to grow together and have our own time to do our own things as well. It's been nothing but positive.
Oh, that's all. It's so awesome to hear that. It's just really nice because it's. I was actually talking to a friend last night about this. She doesn't want to have kids, and we were just talking about how there's such a strong model of, you know, getting married, have kids, maybe buy a house, maybe not so much anymore, but, you know, there's like this kind of very clear model that so many people follow, and we were just both saying, this model cannot possibly work for everyone. Like, everyone's so different, and everyone has such different needs and, you know, desires and wants out of life, and it just cannot possibly. I'm sure it works for a lot of people, but it's lovely to hear about, you know, having relationships where people are kind of just open to that.
And Jude, it's not all about freedom either. I mean, in a sense, it's about commitments. In my late 20s and 30s, like, it was work, but I loved it. I didn't regret it for a minute because it was my absolute life and my passion. Even people dear to me have said, you know, you have children and cannot be selfish. There's no capacity for that. And I think, I'm not selfish. Like, is that a crack at me? Because I don't think I am. My life hasn't just been, you know, eating cake. It's actually been about doing hard yards in community settings.
It's interesting you say that, Alison, about the freedom thing and the selfish thing, because in my head, especially when you're talking about environmental concerns, I mean, I kind of feel like not having children is almost the opposite of selfish in that aspect. And I think you could look at having kids or not having kids could be both selfish and selfless in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, it's just because there's so many different circumstances.
Things have to change, things are changing, but we're not recognising the impact of childlessness beyond saying, oh my God, what's going to happen with population growth and how do we support future taxes?
Yeah.
But actually, this is another level of diversity. Our workplaces need to be thinking in this space about policy. For example, like we have maternity leave, we have paternity leave, but we don't have the leave for people whose experience might be grief-related, because of what's happening on an IVF front. There's sort of not necessarily a recognition that even our institutions need to change to support this growing body of men and women.
That's really true. It's this type of diversity that is just completely silent.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, what's the problem? Women can choose. Nobody comes after you and attacks you for not doing it. There was an interview with some environmental organisations that had done a survey of whether women were choosing or not choosing to have children. They were interviewed on ABC radio, and the two women were both mothers that we interviewed, and they were talking about the stats. And then they had callers, and this guy called in. Like, you would really think that everyone would just think, okay, these women are doing what they want, whatever.
Yeah.
This man called in and said, like, he was fuming, he was furious, and he said, what are women going to do next?
Oh.
So, and the study was talking about women being too concerned about what's happening with the environment, but that was enough to infuriate him. That some women were considering not having children. How dare they?
Yeah,
Outrage.
because it obviously affects him very personally.
But there was also a sense from the interviewers who were, great professional women, who thought the statistics were sad, that all these young women are choosing fewer children than the norm or not having. And of course, we were sitting listening to this, and we're not sad, we're mad.
And really disappointed, that women who are involved in the environment should think that that's a sad decision. It was...
Because these are young
baffling.
Women who are saying, right, let's make a stand. We can't keep adding. We've got this resource overload.
And we don't know if the women were sad or not.
Yeah, that's not in the statistics.
Yeah, that wasn't in the statistics, but that was the overlay.
And I just think, with this person who on the talkback radio who's so mad at women for not having kids, I feel like that's so common with anything relating to issues that women face, where it's like a lot of invisible beliefs in your sort of cultural backgrounds and family backgrounds. Did you feel this was something that you had to explain to your family, or did they kind of understand it?
It's probably not something that we've really talked about in depth in my family, except with my sister, who had a child and desperately wanted her child to have cousins.
Right.
So she did tell me to say on this video that her one disappointment is that her daughter doesn't have cousins. But in jest. But yeah, I think culturally for us it was, we were just kind of a middle class, English background type family, that it was assumed that you would go through the process of marriage, house, kids. It was potentially a bit of a surprise that didn't happen, but perfectly okay, in the end.
Yeah, cool.
And I think if there's a really intense cultural expectation, it'd probably be akin to the process of coming out.
After we did the first conversation at the Sustainable Living Festival, my goddaughter actually came up to me, sat on the couch and said, I just want to tell you that this has been awesome, and I've been telling my friends at uni about you, and that this is an option, that you don't have to have kids.
When people see that, it just goes into your brain and you just become aware that it's...
Well, particularly when there's been this glamorised Hollywood version of what a mum's being like, and so it really became this status thing, I think, in some areas of society.
And also the thing about emotion and sorrow, and people saying, but, won't you be lonely?
Yeah.
And loveless.
It's like, we won't have the loneliness of the empty nesters, because, the nester's been constantly full of other things, and there's nothing getting in the way of that.
I think in my family background, it's sort of that I think my mother just can't imagine how somebody could be fulfilled
Yes.
if they didn't have, and it's just it's like you don't have to understand, but you just have to accept that we're responsible adults and we're making the right choices for ourselves.
That's right.
That's
Best
really
for
what it
us.
is.
Yeah.
And also that you are a member of your family no matter what. So, if you do have siblings and they have a big tribe, it doesn't mean that your position within the family should be less considered because you haven't got a tribe of your own kids. Sometimes there can be a consideration of the validity of someone that, because they don't have a family, like the Julia Gillard situation, or like the fact that we're constantly, there's this thing about Aussie families and helping Aussie families out. Well, I mean, what about, like what
Aussie
are
singles.
Aussie singles who are working hard, who are, don't get the family tax breaks, who are not taking maternity leave, but still have have roles as carers or, all those, or
contribute in some way to the
contributing.
village.
I still think a lot of parents just wouldn't be able to accept. They'd be like, oh yeah, you feel love, but you just don't know how deep this love is with my child. But it's like, but you don't know what it's like inside my relationship. I feel incredibly deep and intense fondness and love inside my relationship, and I can't know what it would have been like to have a child, but I can know the depth of that in my human experience, and I don't feel lacking.
It's not a mathematical competition. It's just like everyone's different. It's like the assumption is that you will have kids. In the same way, the assumption is you're straight. And it's like, it'd be nice to work towards, a world where there is no assumption on whether you're straight or, bisexual, whatever it is. And the assumption isn't that you're definitely going to have kids. It's just... It's like you start off with a neutral, just a neutral. Now let's make decisions based on who you are. So
after we spoke at the Sustainable Living Festival, and another time we've been interviewed, people are like, how can you join? And we're like, you just need to go out there and have conversations. You just need to find some other women to have the conversations and give yourself the title. Give you elevate yourself to the status of a baroness. Before the Sustainable Living Festival, we actually dressed up as baronesses. We put wigs on. It was a crack up. Standing on that idea too a little bit is baronesses in history. Some of them have been educated women that have been able to be quite radical and stir the pot a bit. So that's another way we like to connect with the baroness type.
What are some of the funniest or most inappropriate things people have said to you in regards to your choice, if you feel like sharing?
I remember having a conversation in a train in India with a man who just could not understand that I had a purpose in life. One, I was actually in India without my husband, and how would I be getting permission for that? But then to not have children on top of that was just, he could not understand it. And recently, a conversation with a young man at work who's just recently had a child, and it was mind-blowing that I didn't have children, and how would I have a relationship with my parents, because grandchildren are such an important part of the relationship.
Oh boy.
An elderly man asked me if I had kids, and I said no, and he was really very genuinely concerned, and he was like, I'm so sorry. And it's like I'd said, I just lost my wallet, and I'm here stuck, and I don't have a ticket out of here. And I kind of was thinking, who's he talking to? Like, is there someone else here? Because it's never been a sorry story.
Have you had that don't worry, it'll happen one day?
Yes.
Oh, look, when I was younger.
I was having a fun conversation with somebody I've known for like 20 years, and he was celebrating having his child, which I think that's fantastic. His child was quite grown up, but I said, oh no, I'm going to choose not to have kids. And he said, but you've got to want to have kids. And so that was probably the conversation that shocked me from somebody I knew. He had time to get used to that idea, but you've got to want to.
It sounds like a lot of kind of breaking people's brains often. They're just like the person at your work who's just like, what do you mean? I don't understand. I've been in a relationship with someone for about 3 years, and it comes up as being like, well, like when you meet the right person, you want to have kids, which is quite insulting. He's sitting right there, like that just seems a little strange, and that's kind of the sort of, again, it's like a weird hierarchy of this kind of relationship is more valuable than this kind of rather than like they're just two different.
I just encourage, young women or young men to really think about it. Like, is it what you want? Because it can be a really rich experience, and I think, and obviously we know parenting can as well. But just think about it before you rush into doing what you think is normal. And if someone sells you a story about, oh, you'll be lonely or you'll regret it if you don't, just know there's an alternative chapter. Yeah.
And often when people say stuff like that, that's just they're basing that on how they feel, and it doesn't necessarily apply to you.
And I think one of the classics is that people worry about the moment of their death. Who's going to be standing around the bed at the moment of their death? Well, the big news is that most people are ageing in nursing homes without their families. Their families their children aren't taking care of them.
Yeah.
They might be there on the phone, but ultimately, that journey of ageing is often alone, and having a child's no guarantee that you're going to have an amazing relationship and that person's going to be there to support you. And so recently I've sort of said in response to that question, well, I'm going to cultivate community and love around me, and it doesn't necessarily have to be offspring that's standing around your deathbed.
And also a lot of pressure on the having a baby and just trying to baby right away.
You're going to be at my death.
You're going to be at my death, to support me.
It's a lot of pressure.
And we used to have children to help at the farm or the house, etc. We don't need that now. No. So, it is time, the model needs to change. Absolutely. And there's a lot of work to do there.
Well, it's been so lovely chatting to you all. And I'll be at the next meeting. Please.
You're welcome.
It was lovely to meet you all.
It's like a party, more than a party than a meeting.
Excellent. I love it.
We froth up with feminist ideas. They come out thick and fast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It opens to a yard.